Come on up, Chip.
Great to see you.
Wow, these guys are good. I thought I was coming to some kind of technology conference with a bunch of geeks, and these guys have game shows and all kinds of things. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm actually excited to be in this stadium. Back in the 1970s, I was a huge Boston Patriots fan, which is really bizarre because I lived in Southern California. But both of my parents went to Stanford. I ended up going there myself. Both my parents went to Stanford, and this guy, Jim Plunkett, was the quarterback of the Boston Patriots back then, and it was a terrible team. Absolutely terrible. Does anybody remember back then, the Boston Patriots? Anybody a loyal fan from all the way back then? Okay. Well, you had to be a loyal fan during that era. But speaking of transformation, what a transformation this franchise has had over the course of the last 3 decades. So after my talk today, the reason you have these on your table is we're going to go out and play Frisbee football out on the field right after this. Is that okay? Sounds good, Tim? Okay. This will make a lot more sense to you at the end of my talk. So I know last year the focus was on fusion. The focus was on why. You had my good friend Simon Sinek here last year speaking. Many of you probably were here as well. And this year it's more focused on the idea of transformation and the how. And the thing I want to really emphasize is that transformation is not just some circumstance that happens out of the blue. It is an intentional act. It is something that happens because you put your focus on it, and transformation occurs as a result of that. I remember when I was about 10 years old, I was in a classroom with a science teacher, and she was describing the process of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, and the chrysalis and all of this. And I was fascinated by it. And then she told a little story about 2 little caterpillars on the ground, both talking to each other and looking at the butterfly in the sky and pondering the fact, why couldn't they become butterflies someday? And they thought that it was just something some other kind of animal could be able to do. But the truth is, we all have the capacity to transform. And the fact is, those 2 little caterpillars at some point in their life became butterflies. I actually spent a good portion of my career on the Apple campus. I'm very, very fortunate that I'm close with a guy named Ron Johnson. Ron Johnson's now the CEO of JCPenney. But back then, he was originally at Target stores, and then he was handpicked by Steve Jobs to come and open Apple's retail stores around the world. Concept them, figure out the service model, and go out and create Apple's retail stores around the world. At the time, this was back in 1999, and Ron and I had gone to college together. A lot of people thought he was crazy to leave Target to go to Apple. Steve Jobs had been at Apple for about 2 years since coming back. And Apple is really a caterpillar to butterfly story, no doubt about it. Well, what I've learned over 13, 14 years of spending a lot of time on the Apple campus, having them use my model, Peak, and having them use Maslow as a fundamental piece of how they created their retail stores, is that the process of turning from a caterpillar to a butterfly is a very gooey process. The process, when you actually are that caterpillar actually going into the chrysalis and then coming out as a butterfly, if you were to open up the chrysalis in mid-goo, in mid-process, it wouldn't look very good. And I have to say, having that sort of bird's eye view of Apple back in the first 5 years of Steve Jobs being back, this was a messy place in all kinds of ways. And there are a lot of reasons why people would look at them and say they aren't going to make it. But what I will say for myself, having been a CEO for 24 years, is that when you're in the midst of that goo, sometimes that's when the transformation is most likely to occur. So you go from go to goo to good. And by the process of getting to the good actually requires you to go through the goo. So I'm going to talk today about my experience. Yes, I've written a book and Peak, How Great Companies Get Their Mojo from Maslow. Tim is a disciple. He loves that book, and I appreciate that. But I'm not up here as an author today. I'm up here as a practitioner. For 24 years, I was the CEO of a company I founded. And we went through the goo twice. Twice in the same decade, we had a once-in-a-lifetime downturn. First with the dot-com bust in the Bay Area. We were a Bay Area company, the largest hotelier in the Bay Area. And then secondly, with this Great Recession. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my history, and then I'm going to try to give you some ideas that I think are broad ideas that speak to the idea of how you can create transformation in your own organization. Let's start with oh, there we go. There's the lead slide. Just going to start a little bit philosophically here. So life and business is all about where you pay your attention. Chris did a really good job going back up and forth here, didn't he? I'm going to do my best, although I feel like I'm a runway model, and I'm not a very good runway model. But the process of actually creating transformation is a process of actually being on a trapeze. When a trapeze artist goes from one rung here to another one there, there's a process when you're in midair, and there's transformation happening right there, at least in faith, about the fact you're going to make it to the other rung. The truth is that as we become better and better at what we do, we get more and more stuck in a place of success. Nothing wrong with that. Clayton Christensen's written the book, about disruptive innovation. Generally speaking, we get so used to seeing ourselves as who we are today that we can't even imagine what that transformational organization could be 5 years from now. And we get more and more conservative in the process. So one of the things I'm going to talk about today is that if life and business is all about where you pay your attention, most of us, as we've learned leadership and management, is to focus on what we know and to manage what we can measure. And the process of just focusing on what's most easily measurable, which is what's at the bottom of the pyramid, gets us to a place where all we ever do is survive or maybe succeed, but we never transform. Now, for some of you, you're thinking, that is really abstract. I have no idea what you're talking about. But let me tell you, over the next few minutes, you're going to have a much better sense of that, and we'll make this very practical. So here's 3 different people. You could be one of these 3 people. Hopefully you were that woman, jumping for joy. For those of you who are the guy with your head on the computer, hopefully this is, I hope you're here. Glad to be here. I know that for me, on any one day, I could be any one of these 3 people. I could be, the guy who's having a miserable day, the guy who's having seemingly a good day, or that woman jumping for joy. The truth is, if we were to put it in the form of a pyramid, this is what the pyramid would look like. And most of the people who work with us tend to be at this base of the pyramid. They tend to be in a place where what they see their work as is more of a job than a career or a calling. Now, what's true of individuals is also true of companies. Here are 3 companies. For those of you who are in an industry and you're saying, I wish I was in a different industry, thank God you're not in this industry. Anybody in this industry in the audience here today? No. That's because they're all going bankrupt. They have too much else to do. Actually, interesting study. I was reading an article about Southwest Airlines last week. This is the only major airline in America that's been in existence for 25 years that has not been bankrupt in the last 25 years. Only one. So what is true of individuals is also true of companies. For 40 years, Southwest Airlines as an organization has been a transformational role model. So how have they done that? Well, first of all, one of the things they've done remarkably well is to actually embed this pyramid in their thinking about how they create a workplace that creates transformation for the people who work with them. So we have one of 3 relationships with our work. We either have a job, a career, or a calling. There are no other choices, guys. So, in fact, in the last chapter of Peak, there's even a little quiz you can take that allows you, with 15 questions, to understand, do you have a job, a career, or a calling? So most organizations look like this. In fact, the stats, when they do statistics, Gallup, I'm going to be at the Gallup offices next week. They've done an analysis of this, and they found that 65% of American workers think of their work as a job. About 25% think of it as a career. And about 10% think of it as a calling. Now let me tell you a quick story that relates to Southwest Airlines that relates to this pyramid. So in November 2008, I was taking a trip from Austin, Texas to Dallas. And I was flying on Southwest. And this was November 2008. And if you remember the first half of 2008, we had a robust worldwide economy. I know it's hard to remember back that far, 4 years ago. But 4 years ago, we had a robust worldwide economy. And we know that partly because we know gas prices and jet fuel prices were spiking back then. OK. Summer of 2008, the airlines of America started charging for things, because jet fuel prices had spiked, that they hadn't charged for before. What did airlines start charging for? Bags. What else? What's that? Food. Food, yes. Legroom. What else? Pillows. Seats. Yeah, more legroom, more seats. Yes, what else? Headphones. Anything else? Everything, yes. What? Group 1, yeah, sort of priority boarding. Internet access, yes, true. There was one airline in Europe, Ryanair, that almost started charging for the toilets. Well, that's a captive audience. You know, those of us on a plane, what are we going to do if we, you know? So fortunately, their customers heard about it and they didn't. So November 2008, I'm on a plane from Austin to Dallas on Southwest Airlines, and there's a guy walking down the aisle with the flight attendants who's clearly not a flight attendant, not dressed like one, and he's handing out peanuts. So I was like, he looks sort of familiar. It wasn't Herb Kelleher, who was for 37 years the Southwest Airlines CEO. But as I looked in my Southwest Spirit magazine, I saw, wow, that is Gary Kelly. That's the CEO of Southwest Airlines. And he got to the back of the plane. He was handing out peanuts because that's what Herb Kelleher, the CEO, used to do whenever he was on a Southwest flight. And he got to the back of the plane, and I actually decided to corral him. No one was talking to him. And I decided to talk with him because our company, since we're a large boutique hotel company, we do a lot of strategic marketing with Southwest. And I asked him a question. I said, why is it that you're not charging for bags? At that point in November 2008, there was no marketing campaign from Southwest about bags fly free. What do you think that Gary Kelly said? What do you think his answer was in terms of why they were not charging for bags? And actually, soon after that, about a month later, 6 months later, Wall Street Journal wrote an article about the fact that Southwest Airlines was leaving $500 million a year on the table because they weren't charging for bags. PR. He didn't say that. It wasn't PR. What do you think his answer was? What's that? Service? Customer service. They pride themselves on customer service. That was not the answer. But good answer, but not the answer. What's that? It's not right. OK, well, that sounds good. But, you know, that's not what he said. What else? Because everyone else is. It's a differentiator. Good answer. Good answer. Not the right answer. He didn't need to. They didn't need to. Nope, he didn't say that either. It's what? It's part of the passenger? It's an extension of the passenger. Well, sometimes it feels like that, all that emotional baggage with our luggage. But yes, no, that wasn't it. But that's a good answer. What else? Never thought about it? Oh, I hope. Yeah, that's what he said to the Wall Street analysts, too. No, that wasn't it. What else? Perception? Perception. Nope, he didn't say that. Never had before. Nope. They fly people, not bags. True, but that was not it. Look at the pyramid. Look at what's up there right now and think about an answer that might relate to that.
They didn't want to be like everyone else.
That's true, but that was not the answer. Yes. Because they're there to serve others Not at the expense of service. You're getting really warm, really warm.
Customers don't want to pay for bags.
That's true. That's not it, though. Have you been to one of my speeches before? Yes, you have. Okay. Well, he just said, we don't want to turn our flight attendants into baggage handlers. What he said to me was this. He pointed at, I expected him to talk about customer satisfaction, customer service. He pointed at a flight attendant who seemed to be having a good time, having a humorous conversation with a customer. And he said, have you ever noticed that the flight attendants on Southwest are having a different experience with their work than those on United? And I said, yeah, I have noticed that. Your flight attendants seem to be having a better time, and they're more humorous, and I just feel a little bit, happier in the sky with you guys. He said, that's true. That was true before United started charging for the bags. As soon as United started charging for the bags, the flight attendants became baggage handlers. And those United flight attendants who actually thought of their work as a job almost felt like they had less than a job. And this is where he summarized that's related to this pyramid. He said, when we make decisions as an organization, the first and foremost thing we ask ourselves is, are we getting in the way of our employees living their calling? Are we getting in the way of our employees living their calling? What he in essence said, we had another 15 minutes of conversation, is that if they do their jobs well as leaders, they create an environment where people flourish and live their calling. They do everything they can at Southwest Airlines to help their flight attendants live their calling. And interestingly enough, since the process of charging for bags at the other airlines, on-time performance went down, employee satisfaction went down, customer satisfaction went down at all airlines except for Southwest. Now, Southwest actually has had some problems in the last couple of years that are unrelated to bags. But the bottom line is this, that when you think of your workforce like this, it has a profound impact on turning this pyramid into a square, such that you may have as many people living a calling in their work as are living a job. All right. Let me keep going. I'll tell you just briefly. I usually spend more time on this, but I'm not. I'm going to just go quickly through my story. My calling in life, I was 26 years old. I was going through a midlife crisis. I hated what I was doing. I graduated from Stanford Business School as the youngest guy in my class. I thought I was going to go on, take on the world, and I was sort of burned out. I had a job, barely, with a commercial real estate developer, and I didn't enjoy it. And so instead, I decided to start my own company, which is a crazy thing, especially given that I was going into the hotel business, which is a business I knew nothing about. I also called the company sort of an odd name, Joie de Vivre, which means joy of life. But I love the idea that the company's mission statement, which is creating opportunities to celebrate the joy of life, was also the name of our company. So that's what we did. I started a company. I bought this motel in the inner city of San Francisco called the Caravan Lodge. How many of you out there, this is over 25 years ago, 26 years ago, before I ever bought this, anybody ever stay at the Caravan Lodge 26 years ago in San Francisco? Well, of course you would not admit it, because this was the place when you walked into the lobby, the nightly rates were posted, $49 a night, and right under that in a slightly smaller font, it just said $20 per hour. This was a no-tell motel. You know what I mean? It's the kind of place that was really, really busy at the lunch hour, and it didn't have a restaurant. You understand what I mean, right? Get it? Okay, got it. Okay. So if you're going to buy a motel, you don't have no hotel experience, you're buying a motel in a bad neighborhood, it's in bankruptcy, you're like, what do you do? Well, we had to transform it, and we did. I called it the Phoenix, which is another form of transformation, the bird that rises mythically from its own ashes. And we turned it into a rock and roll hotel. And what I learned very quickly, it became a big success story, is that in the boutique hotel business, boutique hotels tend to be smaller, more personalized, and very much a representation of the locations in which they're located. In the boutique hotel business, it's not about you are what you eat, it's you are where you sleep. Every time we create a boutique hotel, it's based upon a different magazine. Why did we use magazines as sort of our touchstone for the personality of the hotels? Because magazines, by nature, are very niche-oriented and very lifestyle-oriented, and that's what boutique hotels are as well. They're very niche-oriented, very lifestyle-oriented. So that first hotel that we were creating, the Phoenix, was based upon Rolling Stone magazine. Rolling Stone magazine is a magazine, for rock and rollers, and we knew we wanted to create a hotel for rock and rollers, so we came up with 5 adjectives that defined Rolling Stone magazine: funky, irreverent, adventurous, cool, and young at heart. And everything we did in creating that hotel had to come back to those 5 words. So the kind of staff we hired, the kind of art we chose, etc. What I didn't know in the process of creating this was that the people who would fall in love with the hotel were people who would look at the hotel as almost a mirror for the aspirations of themselves. Now that sounds rather broad and psychological. Basically what I mean is the people who tended to love the Phoenix were people who actually would go to the Phoenix and say 3 days later when they checked out, they might say to their friends, I love that place. They wouldn't say it's my perfect habitat, but they just say, I love that place. And it's partly because they felt a little bit more funky, irreverent, adventurous, cool, or young at heart when they checked out. The place, in essence, the hotel had sort of, through osmosis, sort of given them a sense of an identity refreshment. Their identity, their aspirational identity was refreshed by staying in the hotel. Now, we have done that. So in the 25 years we've been in business, we've actually created more boutique hotels than original boutique hotels than any other company in the world. We're second largest in the US, but we've created more and we've sold a bunch since then. Every time it's been a different magazine. And I won't go through each of these magazines, but I'll just say that the process has helped us to create very original hotels that somehow create this sense of identity refreshment for their customers. And it's part of the reason we could be a $250 million a year company and spend less than $50,000 a year on advertising. We can spend we would be a $250 million a year company, and we spend less than $50,000 a year on advertising. It's partly because we create this intense relationship with our customers such that our customers feel like the hotel is a reflection of how they see themselves, and they go tell their friends. In the old days, it was word of mouth. Today, it's through word of mouse. And they just go tell their friends through TripAdvisor or through what other means there are to tell people. So we were connecting with our customers on a psychographic basis as opposed to a demographic basis. Psychographics are what we look like on the inside, how we feel on the inside, and demographics is how we feel on the outside. All right. So by year 2000, we had 20 hotels, only in the Bay Area. And between 1995 and 2000, we started in 1987. Between 1995 and 2000, we grew like gangbusters. We had double-digit revenue growth every year. And it was a great time to be a hotelier in the Bay Area. We became the largest hotelier in the Bay Area. Our model for how we grew was based upon this image. Now, I go to Harvard here to give talks there to the students. I do it at Stanford as well. And they say, bring an image of your business model. And I bring this, and then everybody laughs and says, no, show us the real business model. And I say, well, no, this is it, actually. And let me explain it. It comes from 3 professors from the Harvard Business School from 30 years ago who wrote a book called The Service Profit Chain. And what they were able to prove is that in a service business, and frankly today, 2/3 of the world's GDP is in service. In service businesses, this is how it works. If you create a great corporate culture, point number 1 on the heart, it leads to enthused and engaged employees. If you have engaged employees, point number 2 on the heart, it leads to point number 3 on the heart, more loyal customers. And if our customers are more loyal, we're growing market share, we're more profitable, and we're usually able to sustain the profits because of the loyalty. And then we can invest back in the culture. So it's a virtuous circle, and it starts, though, with the culture. We learned this from Southwest Airlines, where we've learned a lot of things. That, sometimes what I've learned in the hotel business is sometimes the best thing for me to do is to learn from a different industry and from a different company outside of our industry, whether it's Apple or Southwest. So we turned it into a heart. Southwest didn't have it in the shape of a heart. We turned it in the shape of a heart because, frankly, about half of our employees have English as a second language, and we wanted a visual icon that everybody in the world, no matter what your language was, could understand. I call this karmic capitalism, which sounds like something someone from San Francisco would say. I call it that partly because it's what goes around comes around. if you actually give a great culture to an organization, what comes around at the end of the day is a profitable and sustainable business. Points 1, 2, and 3 on this heart are inputs. Point number 4 is an output. It's what results as a result of doing 1, 2, and 3. All right. Early 2001, we as a company should have been flying high. I wrote a book called The Rebel Rules, Daring to Be Yourself in Business, that Richard Branson wrote the foreword of the book. But the bottom line is when that book came out in January of 2001, and I was going to give some speeches around the country on it, I felt embarrassed because what I saw in the first quarter of 2001 was double-digit revenue drops. And that was because the dot-com boom had become a bust. So all those 5 or 6 years of good times led to, it's almost like the millennium happened and we had a hangover. And we had a hangover in the Bay Area that lasted about 5 years. We had no hotels outside the Bay Area. That was the only place we had hotels. And so we were sort of the caterpillar going into the butterfly, into the chrysalis. We were going into the goo. And we were in a lot of trouble because I didn't have deep pockets. I'm not from a wealthy family. I hadn't capitalized the company well enough. And it was very clear that we were starting to actually lose money hand over fist. Then 9/11 happened. And after 9/11, just a few months later, after the dot-com bust was in full swoon, 9/11 happens. And after that, who wants to jump on a plane? Okay, so that wasn't good. And then we go to war in Afghanistan, and then we go into a recession. SARS happens. Remember SARS 10 years ago? Well, when SARS happened, Asia stopped traveling for 10 months. Travel from Asia dropped 90% for a 10-month period. The number one location that Asians travel to when they come to the US is the San Francisco Bay Area. So that wasn't helpful either. And then we went to war with the Iraqis, and we also went to diplomatic war with the French, if you remember that. We stopped eating what? French fries. Well, we didn't stop eating French fries. We'll never stop eating French fries in this country. We just called them something different. What do we call it? And we started boycotting French companies. Whether you think that was a good idea or a bad idea, I thought it was a really bad idea that I named my company Joie de Vivre. Because I started getting emails. I probably didn't get too many emails from Boston. Pretty liberal place. But I got them from Alabama and everywhere else. I started getting these emails from people saying, we're boycotting Joie de Vivre, and we're going to tell all of our friends, and we have a letter writing campaign to put you out of business. And I would write them back this really quick email back saying, wait a minute, we're not based in Paris. We're based in San Francisco. We're an American company. And I'd get a terse response back saying, oh, you're in San Francisco? That's worse. San Francisco is left of Paris. So I went from being the guy on the left to the guy on the right. All of our eggs were in the wrong basket. They were in the right basket for a long time. And then we had transformation sort of like in the wrong way, and we were in trouble. We were also in trouble because of these guys. When I went into the hotel business, I didn't think I was going to be disruptively innovated. I mean, the hotel business is not all that complex. But these guys disruptively innovated us in the sense that how many here in this room have never used one of these companies to actually book your travel? Oh, geez. There's one. Okay. I was going to say, this is the first time I've ever done this where there's like not one. But usually it's about 1 or 2 or 3 people who've never used these guys. Well, things changed overnight. Because in the old days, our guests would actually call us up, or their travel agent would call us up, and we book them. Now, we had an intermediary. All of a sudden, obviously, prices dropped because that's what happens when the internet's involved, is prices usually drop. Also, the process was much more commoditized. So it wasn't exactly the best way for boutique hoteliers to sell their product. And we pay a commission to them. What kind of commission do you think that we pay to them? 5%. Keep going. 10. Keep going. This is like an auction. 15, 20, 25%. 25% commission. I'm not kidding. In 2000, we didn't have to deal with these guys. After 9/11, this is where we went to buy our travel. After 9/11, we lost our customers. Our customers became promiscuous. You went out and looked for other alternatives. And this is where you found your alternatives. So I've got a company Average room rate for our hotels was $200 in 2000. By 2002, it was $160. But because most of our business now is coming from these guys, we weren't keeping $160. We were keeping $120. We're a fixed cost industry. We need transformation. We were in trouble. We were in serious trouble as a company because we were in the worst market in the country. Between 2001 and 2005, the Bay Area was the worst percentage revenue drop in hotel revenues in the history of American hotels since World War II, other than through natural disaster. And that's where all of our hotels were. So that's why I ended up learning about Maslow. And I learned about Maslow because I went to a bookstore around the corner from my office on my lunch hour. I was depressed because I could see in about 4 months we were going to run out of cash. And I went to the business section of the bookstore, initially looking for a business book. And quite quickly, I ended up in the self-help section of the bookstore. And that's why I actually found out about Maslow. Just a second on Maslow. So Maslow, 5 levels. It was interesting to hear Chris talk about physiological needs. We have water, food, sleep, and air, and now we have internet access. It's sort of a basic need in life, from what we're hearing in the surveys for young people. What I loved about Maslow, I only took 1 psychology class in college, but what I always loved about Maslow, he's the one who said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, he said this to the psychology profession, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And he said that to the psychology profession because what he said is, we as psychologists see people as broken, and our job is to fix them. What if we instead just went out and studied people who are not broken? How about that woman who was jumping for joy in the air? What if we studied her? She seems to be flourishing. What can we learn from her that we could then apply to other people who are having troubles? And that's what he did. It's like best practices versus worst practices. He said, let's focus on best practices in human behavior. And that's how he ended up creating Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So for the next couple months, I became a Maslow nut. I bought every Maslow book I could. I was able to get his diaries for the last 10 years of his life from a friend of mine who knew the family. The family gave me his, there are 100 copies of his diaries around the world, only 100 bound copies, and I got one of them. Now, I don't know why I was doing this. I mean, because I was the CEO of a company that was in trouble, that was running out of cash. But it was also a reminder to me that I called the company Joie de Vivre, Joy of Life, and I was trying to get back to that place. Why did I call this damn company Joy of Life when we're about to run out of cash? So I started asking myself a question, though. I said, if humans aspire to self-actualization, why can't companies? Aren't companies just collections of humans? And they are. We are. And maybe we could create a self-actualized company. Now, I said that at a time where my senior executives were so focused on fear, which is what happens in a recession and a downturn, that they couldn't have imagined what I was talking about here. And you know what that's like. You've been there. But the thing I said was, great leaders visualize potential, and they actualize it into reality. We do that with our people. Herb Kelleher, CEO for 37 years of Southwest Airlines, did that with his secretary. His secretary was and his legal assistant, secretary legal assistant, was a woman named Colleen Barrett. Many, many, many years later, she became the president of Southwest Airlines. A secretary became the president of the most successful airline in America. So transformation and helping people live up to their potential is part of what leaders do. It's part of what Steve Jobs did at Apple in terms of understanding the potential of products, of what customers want. He was phenomenal at being able to understand what a customer wants 5 years from now. Phenomenal. Be able to visualize the potential and actualize it into reality. So when I put it in those terms, we said, okay, let's look at a hierarchy of needs pyramid. Let's look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and apply it to the hotel guest experience. And this is it. With the top of the pyramid, that idea of self-actualization, being all you can be, it's the best way to define self-actualization. The US Army came up with that one, being all you can be, after they had read Maslow, strangely enough. Interesting story. Identity refreshment. That's what we were doing in the boutique hotel business. That's why people would love us. That's why we don't have to spend a lot on advertising. So when we put the hierarchy of needs out there and looked at it from the hotel guest experience, it made some sense. But what we decided to do is to turn it into what I call the transformation pyramid. And if there's one thing I really want you to take away from today, and I think what Tim wants you to take away from today, it's this slide. Because this slide is iconic for life. survival, succeed, transform. Maslow's hierarchy of needs has 5 levels. This one has 3 levels. And the first 2 levels, survival, relates to physiological and safety needs, which are the first 2 levels of Maslow. Succeed relates to social belonging and esteem needs. And then transformation relates to self-actualization. Now this is relevant. Let me just tell you in the form of Atrion, in terms of what Atrion does for you as clients, for those of you who are clients here. Survival need is just make sure it works. Help us to make sure it works. The second level of the pyramid, the idea of success, is help me improve. Help me use the product, the IT product we've got, or go get new IT product that's going to help us be successful. But at the top of the pyramid, it's to really create a differentiator. And that's what Atrion tries to do. Tries to help you as an organization use your IT as a differentiator from a strategic perspective. So that the IT is not just the plumbing. It actually is a potential differentiator. In the context of a relationship between you and an Atrion representative, the baseline is, these are just my own little notes here. Tim didn't give these to me. You want someone to be a problem solver. This is sort of true in life, not just with Atrion. If you have someone who's doing work for you, you want them to be a problem solver at the base level. And then maybe at the mid-level, you want them to be an ally, someone who helps you get better at what you do. But at the top of the pyramid here, you want that person to be not just a friend, the transformational relationship, but also a coach. And somebody who just sort of kicks your rear end a little bit and says, why aren't you thinking about doing this? Or here's some ways you can transform the organization by doing that. And so as you look at this, I actually got a funny letter 4 years ago from a family in Minnesota that actually loved this pyramid. And they said, we're going on our summer vacation in Minnesota to the lake, and we're going to go camping. And the kids are actually using your transformational pyramid chip to actually figure out what to pack for our trip to the lake. And so they said, well, at the base of the pyramid, if you're going and taking a trip to a lake, the first thing that you want to have in the summer in Minnesota is what? Bug spray, exactly. Bug spray is essential because, frankly, if the base of your pyramid in life, in the case of a hotel guest, if I'm going and sleeping in a hotel and I love everything until I get to the room and the bed is sagging like this and I can't sleep in it, something's wrong. Baseline is not met. Maybe the most beautiful hotel in the world, best service, but the baseline is not met. So for them, bug spray was at the base. At the top of the pyramid for this family, what they decided to do is to actually allow their kids to cook, the kids were aged 8 and 10, to cook a fireplace meal for the parents while the parents went for a romantic walk for an hour. Now, it wasn't the best food in the world, that's for sure. But it's something that they'll remember the rest of their lives. And generally speaking, what's at the base of the pyramid is very tangible, bug spray. What's at the top of the pyramid is like what MasterCard said about priceless. What's at the top of the pyramid is what's intangible. So we used this pyramid and applied it to our 3 most important stakeholders, our employees, our customers, and our investors. I'm going to go through that really quickly. The employee pyramid is money, recognition, and meaning. This is true of any organization. And I've gone out and talked to investment bankers, and I've talked to nonprofit organizations. Now, the actual lines may shift a little bit. For investment bankers, this pyramid here is, well, at first I thought it was money, money, money. But it's not money, money, money. It's money, recognition, and meaning, but the line for money is about 80% up there. And then you got a thin layer of recognition and a thin layer of meaning. So money, recognition, and meaning. We think as leaders that the #1 reason people leave their jobs in America is because of money. Is that true? No. It's 4th place. The 4th most likely reason people leave their jobs in the United States is money. What's the #1 reason people leave their jobs in the US? Recognition, or specifically by whom? Their boss. As Marcus Buckingham says, people join a company and they leave their boss. So just helping people get better compensation, that's a baseline. That's like a saggy bed. If I'm not getting compensated well, I can't sleep there. If I'm not being compensated well, I can't work there. But the bottom line is, it is not the primary differentiator. A step above that is recognition. You feel recognized by your boss, by the company, you like your job title, you see a career path for yourself, etc. That's what creates loyalty. And that's what creates a sense of success. So employees who feel successful have their social belonging and their esteem needs met. Middle of the pyramid. Top of the pyramid, though, is meaning and inspiration and transformation and self-actualization. And that all sounds really abstract. But remember that pyramid you saw earlier, job, career, calling? Take a peek at this right now. It actually lines up. When someone is having an experience of living their calling in their work, they are internally motivated as opposed to externally motivated. Money and recognition are external motivators. Nothing wrong with that. That's how most of us work in the world. But if you can have a collection of employees who love working and doing what they do, not because it's a bartering system of money and recognition, that's important, but primarily because they're getting fueled by the meaning and the calling, that's the kind of employees I want hanging around me. We as a company have turnover that's 1/3 to 1/4 the industry average, and we pay at the 50th percentile. Why? It's because of levels 2 and 3 in this pyramid, but especially level 3. So creating an inspired workforce is part of it. And during Q&A at the end, if people have questions about that, you can learn more. We can talk more about it. And it's also in Chapter 6 of Peak if you want to read the book. Let's talk about the customer pyramid. Now, the customer pyramid is particularly interesting to me, especially for companies that are in the B2B business. In my book, my company is a B2C business primarily, although we do a lot of corporate accounts as well. The baseline of this pyramid, the survival need for any customer in any industry, is please meet my expectations. Just think about who your customer is. Their survival need, meaning when you're a survivor, your customer who's surviving with you, it means you're satisfied, may not be loyal. In fact, 70% of the satisfied customers in America today are likely to defect. That's what Bain and company has been able to show based upon their surveys. So just having a survival experience with your customer is not enough today. But if you don't even have that, you're not even on the pyramid. So the expectation of customers is they want their basics met. A step above that is their desires. When you have your desires met as a customer, you feel more successful. And so one of the questions you could ask back at the office with your team is, for your core customer, what's the difference between an expectation and a desire? And that question is a really relevant one because it actually helps you understand what are the things that are going to help to differentiate yourself. Because what happens as you move up this pyramid, you get more differentiated. As you move up this pyramid, you move into a more differentiated place. At the top of this pyramid is the idea of meeting the unrecognized needs of the customer. We saw earlier the buggy whip 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago. Henry Ford said over 100 years ago, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. What he meant by that, and this is the reason why Apple doesn't do focus groups. Never. Zero. They did when Jobs wasn't there. They did lots of focus groups. And they didn't find out anything. Customers at the peak of the pyramid have unrecognized needs that they don't even know how to articulate. So that means the best companies are mind readers. That sounds like a really high aspiration and a hard one to live up to. I'm going to tell you right now, just to take you through 4 steps of how you can do that. Great companies, transformational companies, focus on how to create a self-actualized customer. Self-actualized customer at the peak of this pyramid is more likely to be an advocate and maybe an evangelist. So let's look at a few reasons. Well, let me ask you, actually, even before that. When you're thinking about this pyramid and you're in the B2B business as opposed to B2C, you actually need to think about 2 pyramids. There's the pyramid of the company. How do we satisfy the company needs? What's the company need that we're selling to the client in terms of their expectations, their desires, and their unrecognized needs? And then what's the decision maker's hierarchy of needs as well? The person who's going to make a decision may have a specific collection of hierarchy of needs. In fact, what we see so often, is that the decision maker is actually more focused on the survival needs than maybe the company is. Because this decision maker is really scared to make a decision that's going to put their job in jeopardy. It's like it goes back to the old days of you won't get fired for actually choosing IBM. So being able to understand both of those pyramids, what's the pyramid for the company and what's the pyramid for the decision maker, is one first step. The second thing you might want to actually consider doing, we did this as an exercise a few years ago, and this came from a guy named Ted Levitt, professor at Harvard, but also came from Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker is my favorite management theorist of all time. He suggested the following exercise, and I would suggest you might do it in your company. Sit two people in front of each other. You might have 50 people in a room, so you have 25 pairs of people. Sit two people in front of each other, and then have one of them ask the same recurring question 5 times. What business are we in? The person on the other side will then answer. In our case, as a hotelier, we'd say, first question is, what business are you in? OK, the answer is, we're hoteliers. We take care of people when they're far away from home. OK. The person who's asking the question asks again, what business are we in? OK, let me try again, and let me go a little deeper. By the 5th time we had actually answered that question, what business are we in, we came to realize that we were in the identity refreshment business, which sounds crazy. But it helped us to understand our true differentiator, our why, to use Simon's words, our why as an organization. The fact that we can create the highest customer satisfaction scores, which we do. We have the highest customer satisfaction scores of any hotel company in America. How do we do that? We do it by focusing on the identity refreshment. That's our why. That's our sense of differentiation. So you could do that. And by the time I've done this with companies, they're even like ball bearings kind of companies, like manufacturing companies. It feels like, well, there's nothing beyond the first answer. There's usually something beyond the first answer. You just have to go for it. You have to go into the chrysalis and go into the goo and then come out something else. And it works. So that's one question you could ask. And the second question you could ask is the following. If we didn't exist anymore as an organization, who would care? Now, for 24 years was the CEO. I now write and speak, and I'm still a major owner of the company, but I now just do other things. I go out and consult for companies sometimes. And I got to tell you, anybody here from Gap, the Gap organization? Gap's based in San Francisco, Gap the retailer. I work with them and many other organizations. And when I ask that question at Gap, why do you exist? And if you didn't exist, who would care? Everybody's fleeing for the bathroom. Because it's a hard question to answer and really a scary question. If you can't answer that well, why do we exist and who would care if we didn't exist and how would the world be different? I got to tell you, you're probably stuck at the success level. Survival, success, succeed, transform. Many of us get stuck at the success level, just doing a better job of executing on what we've been doing for a long time, and we never even imagine that there's the quantum leap to transformation. And just because you are successful at what you do, if you aren't there as an organization anymore, I bet there's someone else within 6 months will take all your customers, and they won't notice a lot. So this is just prompting you to sort of say, how do we look more deeply at what it is that we do that addresses the unrecognized needs of our customers? So I'm going to go through 4 different themes of how you can actually address these higher needs. First of all is help your customers meet their highest goals. Now, just do it is Nike's marketing tagline, but it's also just how they do business. If you spend any time on the Nike campus up in Oregon, you get that is what they're all about. It's all about performance. It's a performance-driven organization. Company that did this, that did it in the most boring of industries, Bank of America, the Keep the Change program. How many people are signed up with the Keep the Change program? Do you or have some familiarity with it? So a good number of you. So let me explain it because it's a really interesting story, and I'll be brief because I'm running out of time. Bank of America created the most successful savings program in the history of American banking by sending 2 ethnographers. Ethnographers are like cultural anthropologists who go into customers' homes. They sent 2 ethnographers out into single mothers' homes trying to understand the relationship these mothers have with money. And these ethnographers came back with 2 key findings. Number one is single mothers care about savings more than anybody else, because if you're the single parent with kids and you know at some point something might happen to you, you want to make sure that there's a nest egg for your kids. So savings was important. Number two is when the women would actually fill out their check register of a check they'd write, $28.28. When they put it in the check register, what would they do? What's that? They round up. It's always, the women always know this. They round up. Right? Why? It's very weird. Men don't do this like that. Women, they round up. So when they put it in the check register, they wouldn't put $28.28. They put $29 in. So all of a sudden, 72 cents miraculously disappeared. So what Bank of America thought through is, let's create an electric piggy bank. The unrecognized need of the customer was they want to save more. They would love to have an electronic piggy bank, but we don't have one. So what they did is they created a debit card. And when you are a Keep the Change member, you get this debit card, and when you buy something for $28.28, when you get your bill, it says $29. And the other 72 cents, Bank of America pockets it. No, I'm kidding. That's how it would be these days, right? So now the 72 cents goes into a savings account, and over time, you have an electronic piggy bank, and you save a lot of money. So, most successful program in the history of banking. Second thing you could do is give your customers the ability to truly express themselves. How many of you have a Harley Davidson tattoo on your body? And if you do, please don't show us where it is. Is someone over there? No, really? No. There are a lot of people. Supposedly, according to Harley Davidson, over 40,000 people in America actually have a Harley Davidson tattoo on their body. You know a company has created a self-actualized relationship with the customer when they're tattooing the logo of the company on their body. Apple certainly has this. And you know, Joie de Vivre, we've done this with our habitat, our identity refreshment. Jones Soda, you know, it's a simple example. They're selling sugar water. They got to differentiate themselves. Years and years ago, they started differentiating themselves by saying, once a month, we'll pick the best photo that comes, that you send online to the Jones Soda site, and we'll create a new label based upon the photo. So many people actually had submitted photos, and this data is now way old. It's like over 5 million photos, I think, at this point. Such that people actually started asking for their own Jones Soda with the photo on it that they had actually sent in. And so Jones Soda created a whole new business. For $30 for a 12-pack, you get your own Jones Soda with the photo on it. I have no idea if the math on this works financially for Jones Soda. My impression is it doesn't. But what it does say is that people want products that help them to express themselves. No doubt about that. Thirdly, make your customers feel like they're part of a bigger cause. With Prius 10 years ago, I remember a good friend of mine who had never had a car in her life because she was a complete environmentalist. She said, "You mean I can buy a car and save the world at the same time?" She did. She bought a Prius. A bunch of other companies are well known for this. Patagonia is one of the more admired companies out there because since 1985, they've given 1% of their sales to environmental causes. Way, 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 way before green marketing was something that everybody wanted to do. So you can create a self-actualized customer by helping them feel like by buying your product, you're actually making the world a better place. And then finally, offer your customers something of real value they hadn't even imagined. FedEx, the Geek Squad. You know, when my friend Robert Stevens started the Geek Squad way before Best Buy bought them. So he created the Geek Squad, and again, a lot of IT people here, let's talk about it. His idea was this: the last thing you ever expected when you're going to have door-to-door service from someone who is a tech geek was a theatrical experience. And that's what the Geek Squad sort of did. They rolled up in their little Beetles that were sort of painted a certain way. They looked like an inspector from, I Spy. And they were dressed funny, and they would come in and have a little sense of humor with you. And so the unrecognized need that you had as a customer was, not only did I get my computer fixed, but I had a little private theatrical experience in my home. And that's part of the reason why ultimately Geek Squad was bought by Best Buy, because they actually had created something that was of some note that grew like gangbusters. Long story short, JetBlue, DirecTV. DirecTV was something that JetBlue put in the planes before 9/11 happened. And then 9/11 happened, and our whole process of going through security at the gates, before going to the gates, was a pain. It was like we were going cattle out to pasture. We were numbers. Well, what JetBlue had done was they created an experience that allowed people to know that when you finally got to your seat after feeling like you're just treated like a cow, you got to your seat and you had your own freedom and independence there in your seat. And in some ways, the unrecognized need of the airline traveler at that point was, yeah, give me a little bit of freedom. I mean, I feel like I'm somehow being, the experience of going through security was so terrible. So it was a big differentiator for JetBlue in its early days. Finally, and just for a second, investors can be self-actualized as well. I know a self-actualized investor sounds like an oxymoron, but at the base of the pyramid, what investors are looking for is their survival needs met, return on investment. The middle of the pyramid is what Warren Buffett would call the relationship alignment, the most famous investor out there. He says that dumb investors focus on the glass of milk, and smart investors focus on the cow. And he says the glass of milk is sort of the base of the pyramid. I'm very lucky I've been able to spend some time with Warren Buffett. And he sees the base of the pyramid here as being, you're just trying to make as much money as quickly as possible. The middle of the pyramid is building a long-term relationship with the people that you're doing business with, which is what Warren Buffett does. And at the top of the pyramid, investors that think of their investment as a legacy have a pride of ownership. And that's where the self-actualized investor comes about. This is all three pyramids together. The punchline you already see if you see the little frisbee-looking thing on your table is there's a heart that goes in the middle. The heart is something we created in 1997 at Joie de Vivre, 5, 6, 7 years before we ever created the full model. And what's interesting about the heart, if you look at it, point number 2 on the heart, the enthusiastic staff part of the heart, is right next to the employee pyramid. Point number 3 on the heart, which is the customer part of the heart, developing strong customer loyalty, is right next to the customer pyramid. And point number 4 on the heart, maintaining a profitable and sustainable business, is right next to the investor pyramid. So if it works well, what does a heart do? It beats. Oh, this is so cheesy. I know. So a heart that beats is part of the way you have a holistic organizational model that allows, in Southwest's case, the fact that if you have flight attendants who are living their calling, that will drive customer loyalty, which will then drive investors' success and profits. So this is a bunch of organizations that consciously have used Maslow in how they've operated or how they've built their models. They're all mentioned in the book Peak. This is the book, Peak, How Great Companies Get Their Mojo from Maslow. My basic premise is if you create peak experiences, which is what Maslow talked about happening at the self-actualization level of his pyramid, you create peak experiences, you create peak performance. And all of this sort of proves some conventional wisdom wrong. Things like the fact that money is not the primary motivator for employees, the fact that customers aren't just being satisfied doesn't make you loyal. That's the base of the pyramid. Go back to that original slide. Life and business is all about where you pay your attention. Most of us pay our attention to the bottom of the pyramid. And we do that because our customer satisfaction scores usually measure things at the bottom of the pyramid. In the hotel business, it's like, was your room clean? Was your check-in efficient? Right? That's what we tend to ask on customer satisfaction surveys. Now, that is not going to create a self-actualized customer. All it does is tell us where we were wrong, but it doesn't tell us where we were big time right. So one of the things to look at is, do your customer satisfaction surveys address higher needs? Something we completely changed within our industry. And then finally, I'll just sum up and open it up to see if there's any questions, to just say, transformation is not easy. For us in the Bay Area, we've gone through 2 once-in-a-lifetime downturns in the same decade, and not fun at times. But what led us to some of the transformation that ultimately led me to writing a couple of books about it was understanding that the process of going from one trapeze rung here to there required a certain amount of faith and a certain amount of willingness to actually make the kind of shift that happens in that chrysalis when a butterfly or a caterpillar goes from a caterpillar to a butterfly. So what I've tried to point out here today is the fact that the most neglected fact in business is that we're all human. And you may have an operating manual for your business or operating model for your business, and you have operating manuals for the computers that you use. But most of us don't have an operating manual for humans. And to me, the one that's been most helpful and powerful in my life, with now a company with over 5,000 employees, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It helped me to understand the operating manual for how we are motivated as humans, whether we're employees, we're customers, or we're investors. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and join you today here in Gillette Stadium, and open it up for any questions. Thank you. So I think there are people with, yes, Michelle's got some microphones going around. So raise your hand. Wait to actually ask the question until the microphone's right in front of you. So who has any questions, comments? Who wants to throw a Frisbee to me?
Nothing.
Where should we start? There's someone back there. Is there anybody with a microphone way back there? Yes, perfect.
Well, it's great to hear you talk, and I enjoyed your book. So what are you going to do next?
What am I going to do? Well, I sold a majority interest in my company to a guy named John Pritzker, a billionaire whose father started Hyatt. I'm still a major owner in the company, still own 17 of the hotels. But I've been spending more and more time writing this new book, Emotional Equations, that came out, became a New York Times bestseller, and then speaking. And then I like going into companies and helping. So I do some consulting using these models within organizations as well. If you want to learn more about that, there's a website, peakorganizations.com, peakorganizations.com, that actually we have people who go out and help use this model and put it into their organization. What else? So some of you probably are doubters. Someone who's a doubter out there, raise your hand and ask a very difficult question. There you go. That did it right there. And you're in the front row. That's even scarier. You didn't trip me as I was walking. Thank you. So what's your name? DJ. DJ. Okay, DJ.
I don't know if I'm necessarily a doubter, but
yeah,
when you bring something like this into a company, the challenges of having that permeate through an organization all the way down to folks who might consider themselves to be at job level as opposed to a career level. What are some of the ways that you can get those attitudes and those feelings to permeate all the way down an organization?
So no, great question. So let me just start by saying the normal company is a pyramid: job, career, calling. The best of companies are maybe at best a square. I don't know anybody who's like this, that's of any size, meaning everybody has a calling. I've not seen that yet. There's some companies out there like Zappos that are actually getting closer and closer to that, from what I've seen, based on spending a lot of time there at their headquarters in Las Vegas. So the best way for me to describe this is that you have to embed the principles of Peak throughout the organization. If you just sort of leave it in the senior executive ranks, then it's not going to work. So what we did back in 2002, in the worst of times, is we decided instead of just doing management retreats, which is something we had always done, we'd always done offsite retreats with our people. Well, starting in 2002, we started doing what we called service retreats. And we took, at a time when we couldn't really afford to do it financially, part of the way we survived, by the way, is I went out and borrowed a little bit under $1 million from a bunch of friends and associates and paid them high interest rates. And that's how we kept the financial side of things around. But we ended up tripling in size. We tripled in size between 2001 and 2007 at a time where the average hotel saw a 35% drop in revenues in our market. So what we did is we took our employees off site, the housekeepers, the bartenders, the bellmen, the line level staff, with managers, with some of our HR team, and we spent a day together. We would do anonymous work climate surveys in advance so that the first thing we did in the morning was to talk about what is it that we're hearing from you. The 50 of you who are here, we're not going to call people out because they're anonymous, but what we see is here's the things that we're doing well as a hotel. Here's the things that we're not doing well as a hotel. Let's talk a little bit more about what we're not doing well. Secondly, we would go into great depth of our customer satisfaction data and say, what are our customers telling us? Thirdly, we look at how are we going to spend capital this year? And if you're a housekeeper from Vietnam who has never in their life done an offsite retreat, and you're being asked how the company should spend $1 million of capital this year in their hotel, you're shocked. But the biggest difference between someone who has a job and someone who has a calling is the difference between a person who has a series of tasks that they do and the person who has a calling who has a focus on the purpose and the impact. One of the most interesting studies on this was done in hospitals. And I know there are a handful of hospital people in the crowd. 5 years ago, a study was done, 5 or 7 years ago, a study was done of American hospitals. The number one variable of successful hospitals in America is what? What do you think? Death rates? Yeah, there are living rates. That's not actually the number one variable, but it's an interesting one. That's certainly an outcome. You could think it's like where it's located. It could be how many specialists are in the hospital because the specialists make all the money. No, the number one indicator of successful hospitals in America, based upon the variable, was how happy are the nurses? Okay? The difference between a nurse who has a job and a nurse who has a calling is the difference between a nurse who looks at their work as 28 different things they have to do in an 8-hour period, and the calling person looks at their work as being the patient advocate. By taking our housekeepers off staff and our bellmen off staff, we help them to look more broadly at where are we going and what are we doing. And that's the number one thing you need to do. It's hard, and it takes a lot of energy and attention to make it work. But if you make it work, it makes a much more better company. We also, in that downturn, chose not to do any layoffs. And that was hard because we said no layoffs, no economic layoffs. Because if you create economic layoffs, we've done it. We've created economic layoffs too, and I've seen the other side of it. If you create the economic layoffs, we had the ability to say all of our salaried people in the company took a 10% pay cut. All of the senior people took a 20% pay cut, 10 or 20%, and I took a salary sabbatical for 3.5 years. But by doing that, it meant that our line level people, the people who have the most contact with our customers, weren't scared. They weren't in the survival mode. They weren't in that place where what the customers were seeing was fear. And that's part of the reason we tripled in size. Great. Is that fine? We can talk later, too. Last question, if there's a last question. There's someone over here. There's someone over there. I can go more. You just tell me. Whoever's got the mic, yeah, here and there. Okay. Yes, let me come on over here.
I was just wondering how you would port your model to, say, more of a government standpoint, where you have people who don't want to spend money and people who don't want to spend money. And
so wait, are you talking about the government in terms of government being a client or customer by spending, or are you talking about organizationally how you embed this within the culture of a government organization?
I think it's a little bit of both because it's, I guess.
Can you actually pull it a little bit? You too? Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying not to do the feedback here. But,
all right, so let me try to actually ask the question so everybody can hear it, okay? So the question is, how would you apply this model to a governmental organization, both organizationally for the employees as well as as a customer, if the government's a customer? On the organization side, that's one of the, interestingly, a lot of nonprofits and governmental organizations have asked us to come into their organization to use this model. And listen, a large percentage of our employees are unionized employees in the hotel industry. And unionized employees, I'm not going to beat up on anybody here, but unionized employees have some similarities to government employees. There's a lot of job security, and there can be a lot of apathy. And so we've been able to make it work. The number one thing is, if you think that people are going to be apathetic and that that's their natural state, then they'll be apathetic. In the book, in chapter 2, I talk about theory X and theory Y. If you've ever heard of theory X and theory Y, Theory Y is a belief in management that employees are by nature lazy and untrustworthy, and so you need to have rules to actually make them work harder. Theory X, on the other hand, I'm sorry, that's theory X. Theory Y, on the other hand, is your belief is that people want to live up to their potential, and that given the right circumstances and habitat, they'll do great. Generally speaking, I come at it from that theory Y perspective, the healthier perspective on how we create an environment where people can live up to their potential, even in the environment of a government. In terms of selling to the government, the number one thing that's true in that environment is there's a lot of survival mentality. You know, just not a lot of budget, lots of fear. If they make the wrong decision, they might lose their job, et cetera. And so you first have to just focus on that survival component of how do you actually address those needs, because you can't address anything higher up the pyramid if you can't get the survival needs met first. So I hope I answered it correctly. And last question, over here? Yeah.
My question is, I often come to symposiums and I hear a lot of great stuff like this, and then you go back and you go to work. Right. And it's hard to overcome the inertia of your organization and the people there, and to really implement this sort of thing. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, beyond just the fact that we have people who help in the Peak Organizations website go out and do that, two thoughts. One is talk to Tim and his team at Atrion, because they took this book and they've said, okay, how can we embed this? And they've still got, I know they still have lots of aspiration of how they can take it further. The nice thing about the book, and again, I'm not an author by trade, and that's not my history. I'm a CEO, I'm a practitioner, a business person. But what was very important to me in writing this book is that it's 14 chapters, and the middle 9 chapters, chapters 4 through 12, have peak prescriptions at the end of each chapter. So it's very specific, anywhere from 3 to 6 different action steps you as an organization can take to actually make this real in your organization. That's the key. I mean, just a theory by itself, and this is the problem with most consultants who just write books, is that it's a great idea, but there's been no how-to, and there's no practical application around it, or a sense that that person who wrote the book ever had to embed these principles in an organization of any size. That's what we did. And then that's what we've done at Apple and at Whole Foods Markets and at Harley-Davidson and elsewhere. So it's, I hope if you read the book that you'll find it's very practical and how-to in that respect. So with that, I think I've gone on probably too long. And I am just happy to be here. Really appreciate the welcome, and I wish you all the best in the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Chip. That was a fantastic presentation, very enlightening. We have no doubt at this point, folks, that you have built up an appetite for transformation. So here's your chance to get started. We are about to head into our lunch break.